Have you ever noticed when a man suddenly becomes quieter, less reactive, and more distant? At first, it feels subtle: missed eye contact, shorter conversations, fewer smiles. You tell yourself it's just stress or a busy week. But deep down, something feels different. Something feels missing. What if I told you, this shift isn't always about losing love? Sometimes, it's about something far more complex: a man choosing peace over partnership. For many men, there comes a breaking point, a moment, when fighting for connection feels more painful than walking away from it, when endless conflicts, silent misunderstandings, and unspoken resentments pile up. They start believing that avoiding the storm is safer than sailing through it. But here's the truth most people overlook. These changes don't happen overnight, and they're not always obvious. You might not notice the first sign, or even the second, until one day, you wake up feeling like you're living beside a stranger. In this video, we're going to uncover 10 powerful, eye-opening signs that reveal when a man has quietly chosen peace over partnership. And I promise you, some of these signs might surprise you. Some might hurt. But all of them will help you see relationships, love, and emotional connection in a completely different way. Stay with me, because what you'll hear next could change the way you understand men forever. Relationships are meant to be a partnership, a safe space where two people support, listen, and grow together. But what happens when one person quietly starts to feel that keeping the peace is more important than staying deeply connected? For many men, this shift doesn't come from a lack of love. It comes from emotional exhaustion, the kind that builds slowly, day by day, with every unresolved argument, every misunderstood word, and every moment they feel unheard. Over time, the weight becomes too heavy, choosing silence over discussion and distance over closeness starts to feel less like giving up and more like survival. The change is often subtle at first. Conversations get shorter. Laughter becomes rare. The warmth between two people slowly fades, replaced by emotional walls no one talks about. And without noticing, the vision of a shared future begins to blur. That's why understanding these signs matters so deeply. It doesn't mean he's stopped loving you, and it doesn't make him a bad partner. It means his emotional needs have shifted, and he no longer knows how to express them. In the next section, we'll explore 10 revealing signs that show when a man has quietly chosen peace over partnership, and why recognizing them early could change everything. Sign number 1. He avoids confrontation at all costs. At first, it seems simple. He no longer argues. He nods, agrees, and walks away from situations that once sparked long conversations. But pay attention. This silence often speaks louder than words. When a man starts avoiding confrontation, it's rarely about laziness or indifference. It's about self-preservation. He has likely reached a point where every disagreement feels like a battlefield he no longer wants to fight on. Instead of expressing his thoughts, he chooses silence, not because he agrees, but because he wants to protect his peace. This might feel calm at first, but beneath that calm is quiet resignation. Problems don't disappear just because they aren't discussed. They build up like hidden waves under the surface, ready to crash later. In many cases, this avoidance reflects a deeper belief. No matter what I say, nothing will change. That's not surrendering the argument, that's surrendering hope. And here's the heartbreaking part. When communication fades, connection follows. It's not the loud arguments that kill relationships. It's the quiet ones where both partners stop fighting altogether. And when the words stop flowing, something even more painful tends to follow. Sign number 2. Emotional withdrawal. After avoiding conflict, the shift often goes deeper into his heart. Emotional withdrawal isn't loud, but it's powerful. Suddenly, he shares less about his day, his dreams, his frustrations, and even his small victories. Conversations that once lasted hours now feel like quick updates about chores, bills, or schedules. It's not that he has nothing to say, it's that he's choosing not to say it. Emotional withdrawal is usually a form of self-protection. When a man feels unheard, criticized, or misunderstood, he retreats into a safe emotional space where he doesn't risk judgment or rejection. But the cost is high. The intimacy that once glued the relationship together starts to fade. You may start to feel like you're living next to him, not with him. Nights spent talking on the couch become nights spent scrolling on separate phones. Shared laughter turns into polite nods. Slowly, an invisible wall rises between you, brick by brick. This doesn't mean he's stopped caring. In fact, it often means he cares too much and doesn't want to keep getting hurt. But over time, that distance creates a dangerous silence that can feel colder than anger itself. And when emotional closeness fades, many men instinctively turn inward, seeking comfort where they feel safest, in solitude. Sign number 3. Prefers solitude over spending time together. Have you noticed him spending more and more time alone? He reads, scrolls endlessly, works late, hits the gym, or disappears into hobbies that don't include you. At first, you may think he just needs space to recharge, and sometimes that's true. But when solitude becomes his escape, it signals something deeper. In a healthy partnership, time apart strengthens togetherness. But when togetherness begins to feel heavy, stressful, or draining, many men retreat into solitude for relief. That quiet moment in the garage, that extra hour on the couch, or that quick walk outside, it's not about being away from you. It's about being away from conflict, expectations, and emotional pressure. The problem, the more time he spends in his own world, the harder it becomes to step back into yours. Over time, the relationship starts to feel like two parallel lives under the same roof. You talk less, touch less, and dream less. Not because love is gone, but because peace feels safer when it's found alone. Solitude becomes addictive. It's quiet, it's predictable, and it's free from confrontation. But what starts as a temporary retreat can slowly turn into emotional isolation, and that shift becomes even clearer when he stops talking about something couples naturally dream about together, the future. Sign number 4. Stops discussing future plans. One of the most revealing signs comes quietly. He stops talking about the future. No more conversations about vacations, home projects, life goals, or even simple weekend plans. In thriving relationships, couples naturally dream together. They plan, they hope, they imagine a shared tomorrow. But when a man chooses peace over partnership, he begins pulling back from that vision. The silence isn't always because he wants to leave sometimes. It's because he's unsure if there's room for his dreams anymore. The uncertainty can feel unsettling. You might notice him hesitating when you ask about next year's goals or deflecting questions about commitments. It's not necessarily that he doesn't care. It's that thinking too far ahead triggers anxiety or guilt. When the future feels unpredictable or emotionally overwhelming, many men retreat into the safety of the present, the one place where they still feel in control. But the cost of avoiding these conversations is high. Without a shared vision, couples often drift apart quietly, even while living under the same roof. And when his vision for tomorrow fades, his motivation to repair the problems of today often fades with it, leading us to the next sign. Sign number 5. Minimal effort in resolving conflicts. Do you remember when disagreements used to spark conversations, when he fought for solutions, stayed up late, hashing things out, and searched for compromises to bring you closer? Compare that to now. When conflict arises today, he shrugs it off with a quiet, "It's fine," or "Forget it." On the surface, it seems calm, but underneath, it often signals emotional fatigue. He stopped believing that resolution is possible. The problem is, this peace isn't real. It's avoidance dressed up as calm. Unspoken resentment lingers beneath the surface. The arguments may have disappeared, but so has the connection. Without honest conversations, wounds never heal, They simply get buried deeper. For many men, this withdrawal from problem-solving isn't about giving up on the relationship. It's about protecting themselves from the emotional toll of trying again and again without success. But over time, the silence becomes louder than any argument. And here's where the danger lies. When he stops seeking solutions inside the relationship, he often starts seeking relief and peace elsewhere in work, friendships, hobbies, or even emotional connections outside the partnership. And that shift can change everything, leading us straight into the next sign. Sign number 6. He finds peace outside the relationship. One of the clearest signs that something has shifted is when he starts seeking peace in places outside the relationship. You notice he spends longer hours at work, takes on new hobbies, joins social groups, or starts hitting the gym more often. Suddenly, he laughs more with friends, colleagues, or even strangers than he does at home. These aren't random choices, they're emotional escapes. When home becomes a space filled with tension, expectations, or misunderstandings, many men subconsciously build new, safe zones where they feel lighter and understood. Work might give him purpose. Hobbies bring him joy. And friendships provide emotional validation. This doesn't mean he's malicious or unfaithful. For many, this shift is a coping mechanism, a way to breathe without feeling trapped by conflict. But over time, these external sources of comfort begin replacing the relationship as his emotional anchor. Slowly, without saying a word, the partnership loses its central place in his heart, and when his energy starts flowing outward instead of inward, something far more intimate often begins to fade. Sign number 7. Avoids emotional intimacy. Emotional intimacy is the invisible thread that binds two people together. It's not just about sharing physical space, it's about sharing hearts, fears, and dreams. But when a man starts choosing peace over partnership, this thread begins to loosen. He avoids vulnerable conversations, deep sharing, and even small gestures of affection. The kisses feel mechanical, the hugs feel shorter, and the late-night talks vanish. You may notice him sitting next to you, but feeling miles away. He listens less, opens up less, and no longer seeks comfort in closeness. On the outside, he's present, but emotionally, he's slipping further into his own world. Often, this withdrawal isn't rejection, it's exhaustion. He's protecting his emotional space from further wounds. But without intimacy, a relationship becomes more like cohabitation than connection. And when that closeness fades, many men turn to an even quieter survival tactic, one that sounds harmless but signals deep disconnection. Sign number 8. He agrees just to keep the peace. At first, it seems cooperative. He starts saying things like, "Okay, sure," or "whatever you want." No arguments, no resistance, no debates. But beneath that apparent harmony lies something dangerous: disengagement. He's not agreeing because he's aligned, he's agreeing because he's exiting. By choosing to nod along rather than express his true feelings, he's quietly giving up on finding solutions. The goal is no longer connection, it's avoiding tension. This can feel deceptively calm in the short term, but over time, it erodes the foundation of real partnership. True relationships thrive on dialogue, compromise, and mutual understanding. To ben. Without honest communication, resentment grows quietly in the background. When a man reaches this point, he's no longer investing in solving issues, he's simply minimizing emotional cost. And as he begins prioritizing harmony above all else, his focus often shifts toward protecting something else entirely, his own well-being. Sign number 9. Prioritizes personal well-being. You notice he's suddenly drawing firmer boundaries around his time, energy, and mental health. He meditates, hits the gym, or spends long stretches alone, recharging. On the surface, these habits seem healthy and individually. They are. But when paired with emotional distance, they tell a different story. Many men choose self-preservation when they feel emotionally overwhelmed. Focusing on personal well-being isn't selfishness, it's survival. But when it becomes a consistent priority over shared growth, the relationship begins to suffer. Instead of working through challenges together, he pours his energy into healing outside the partnership. His emotional balance matters, but when it consistently outweighs the us, the bond begins to weaken, and when these patterns continue unchecked, it leads to the final and most painful sign, one that's impossible to ignore. Sign number 10. Stops investing in the relationship. This is the most powerful and heartbreaking sign of all. He stops trying. No more initiating date nights. No more heartfelt conversations. No more effort to rebuild what's been lost. At this stage, it's not about anger, it's about resignation. He's convinced himself that no matter how much he invests, the outcome won't change. So he conserves his energy, choosing self-protection over reconciliation. The tragedy is that relationships rarely end with one big fight. More often, they fade away through 1,000 small disconnections, moments when gestures are skipped, conversations avoided, and closeness neglected. When investment disappears, the relationship enters its most fragile state. But here's the silver lining. Recognizing this moment can become the turning point. If both partners are willing to act before the silence becomes permanent, healing is still possible. Because love doesn't vanish overnight, it's slowly forgotten when no one fights to keep it alive. When a man chooses peace over partnership, it's rarely about falling out of love, it's about emotional survival. Many men carry an emotional weight they rarely express. When constant arguments, criticism, or unresolved conflicts pile up, something inside them quietly shifts. At first, they try to fix things, to fight for connection. But after feeling unheard or misunderstood for too long, exhaustion sets in. Choosing silence starts to feel safer than being vulnerable. Distance feels easier than confrontation. Over time, this withdrawal isn't just about avoiding pain, it's about protecting their sense of self. Without emotional safety, a man will often seek peace in other spaces, work, friendships, hobbies, or even solitude. It's not because he stopped caring, but because preserving his mental well-being becomes his priority. But here's the hope. Emotional disconnection doesn't have to be permanent. Instead of reacting with blame or anger, approach him with empathy. Create moments where he feels safe enough to open up, where listening matters more than fixing. Gentle, honest conversations can slowly rebuild trust and closeness. Because at the heart of every healthy relationship isn't the absence of conflict, it's the presence of understanding, compassion, and emotional safety. Relationships rarely end because of one big fight. They fade because of the small, quiet moments when connection is lost. When a man chooses peace over partnership, it doesn't always mean he has stopped loving you. It often means he's trying to protect his heart, his mind, and his emotional balance. The most important takeaway from today's video is this: awareness creates possibility. When you can recognize these signs early, you have a chance to pause, reflect, and choose a different path. One where understanding replaces judgment and open conversations replace silence. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Which of these signs resonate with you the most? Have you seen them in your partner, or even in yourself? Your story could help someone else who's going through the same struggle. And if this video spoke to you, make sure to subscribe and turn on the notifications. Because in our next video, we'll talk about how to rebuild trust and reconnect when emotional distance takes over. Remember, healing starts not with perfection, but with empathy, patience, and the willingness to listen